dynamic. Already you saw that we have an input. So, or we have a select like elements, and to make that dynamic and to present that, so and to handle the values of these elements, then we have the ng model directive, ng model. So that makes it dynamic. Already we saw that. This is an attribute directive. Another attribute directive is we have ng class and ng style. So ng class is a directive used to apply CSS class dynamically. You can apply a CSS class dynamically. So we can configure a CSS class dynamically. So that means you can change the appearance of an element dynamically by using this ng class. So ng style is used to apply style dynamically. Inline style dynamically. Actually, we want the effects to apply dynamically. For example, let's see how this binding works. I will create one component to understand. A sample component we will create here. So let's add a component in the components folder. So ng generate component class binding. Okay, I'm adding class binding component, a component called class binding. And we will keep this in the startup. Class binding is in the startup. So class binding. And in the bootstrap, I'm configuring class binding in the start. Okay, now let's check this in the browser. So localhost, you can see class binding is working. Okay. Now, how we can apply the class dynamically? Now, one example, we will see that. Suppose we are having some heading, and for this, I will put the class container. So I want here some text class binding. I want to apply some effects to this heading. So we want to apply some effects to that heading. So there are so many techniques. Suppose first we will define the classes in the CSS file. Go to the class binding CSS file. That means the component CSS file. There we will add some, okay, border style is a class. You know how to write the classes. Classes are written with a dot, and I defined as border 2 pixels solid, some red color, that is the border. So, and this is one class, and I want to apply this class in 3 styles. Actually, we have a string reference, we have a reference, array reference, and we have object reference. String reference means, so If you want multiple classes to apply, you can use array reference. ng class is equal to
Recording in
padding
progress.
as 10 pixel. And we have background style. Background style. So that is background color yellow, something like this. And we have text style. Text style. These are all our own classes we are writing. Text style. So color as red and the text align as center. Like this we configured. Now, if I want to apply multiple classes, then you can see here, we can put here an array reference square brace. In that array, the object. So I return text style. And you can see the text style applied. And array means, comma. So border style. You can see the border style applied. But you will be very much wondering, like, we can give these directly by using class attribute also. Why you are using ng class? Ng class advantage is dynamically it can classes according to the situation and requirement, which we will implement now. Currently, I am showing first in how many ways styles are written, classes are written. One, array style is present, string reference is present. So in string, you can apply only one. In array, you can apply multiple. So you can put comma, we can put background style, background style. But here problem is, if I don't want temporarily border style, then here I have to remove it, remove that border style. So then the border style will be removed. Again, I want to add it. Then again, I need to write it. Instead of that, you can have object reference. Object reference means generally object is written in this curly brace. Here we have to rewrite the class name. Class name is border style. Okay, colon. So do you want to enable or disable? So true or false, it uses a Boolean value. Similarly, comma, comma. So we have another. So we have text style and colon. So true or false, like this you can apply. So now similarly, another one, background style. Background style. You can apply so true or false like this. You can see this is an object reference. So the class name and you want to enable or not. And you see it is applying all. If you want to disable any effect, then just you pass a false value into it. Text style false. Then text style will not be applied. Only border and background is applied. If I say background style false, so that means it will put the background also empty. You can enable. So what is the specialty here now is you can dynamically control this now. Let's see at the top what I am doing. I'm adding a div and the class margin top 3. Here I am adding an unordered list item, and here for this list item I am configuring the options so like this. So input type is equal to checkbox. So, and for this checkbox, I will say background style. Background style. So that is one list item. Similarly, I have another list item that is border style. Border style. Another, so we have text style. Text style. This unordered list, which contains these options, text style, border style checkboxes. And you see here, I am applying the class as list unstyled and form check and form switch. And here I am writing the class as form check input. That is for the checkbox. That means checkbox will have this behavior. Now all the checkboxes will have this class. So checkboxes are displayed like switches. So we have this background style, border style, text style switches are present. And here I given a header saying that, so heading, right, select styles. So that is the header given there, select styles. And when you are selecting here, you can on any styles and you can off the styles. We need to get the value from them. So then that means whether checked or not, we need to get that. So for every checkbox, we configure ng model. And here, so I will define hash, that is back style, or say flag back style. Flag back style, that is containing true or false. It gets ng model. That means flag black back style is containing true or false. So when checkbox is checked, it contains true. Then it contains false like that. So we can configure. So we can configure this ng model. So generally we know that it should have a name. So name I given flag back style. That is the name. That is the back style. So that means background style. Similarly, so for this name is flag border style. Border style and ng model. So hash ng model. So flag border style is equal to ng model. I'm configuring it. And similarly here, the name is equal to flag text style and ng model. So and hash flag text style is ng model. Actually, this flag text style flag border style. First observe what they are returning. I will just put here a binding expression. So flag border style dot value. I'm accessing the border style value. You see here, so when I select this, so border style value, and you on it, it says true. When I off it, it says false. So that is correctly accessing the boolean true or false and displaying. So our intention is to apply this to this content. Now for border style, so for border style, the boolean value comes from, so flag border style dot value. For text style, the boolean value comes from flag text style dot value. And for background style, the value comes from flag back style dot value. We will get the value from there. And you can see now, that means you can dynamically apply the effects. Border style, it will apply border. I selected the background style, it will apply background. I turned off the border style, border is turned off. Again turned on the border style. I applied the text style. I removed the background style. So it will be like this. Border style, it will have only text style. You can turn on and you can turn off the effects. Dynamically, we are applying the effects and we are configuring the classes. It depends on the situation. So whether you want to turn on and off the class, or you want to apply directly multiple classes, or you want to apply only one class, that depending on situation. This kind of presentations are very regularly required because according to the selection, they should change the appearance. So we can apply the classes dynamically. For example, suppose these are very much necessary for us. Suppose when you are doing validations, especially, suppose I'm creating another div here. So, and the class as margin top 3. I'm writing here a header, some register user, and label I defined username. And this have a text box here. So input type is equal to text. And here class is form control. Okay. And below that, so we kept another div. So class as some text danger. And here we are configuring, so a span. So this is the span. Now for this text box, we are giving a reference here, like name is username. NG model, that makes it dynamic. Hash username is equal to NG model. This is now dynamic. Now into this, we are giving a validation. Validation is required. It's a validation. So if required is not satisfied, actually we can display messages. How you can display message? For example, here we have a message, name required. This message should display if this text box is invalid. If the text box is invalid, display this message. If it is valid, don't display the message. So we simply use an ng if. ng if is used to add or remove that message and that depends on username dot. So we have a property for the text box is if username dot invalid. If username is invalid, this name will be displayed. If username is invalid, the name will be displayed. If username is invalid, the name will be displayed. The name will be displayed. So if valid, it will not display. It will not display. So see here generally. So when you are presenting the content, you see here. This is okay already through ng if you are saying. So here we are writing here. And I enter some name into it. I entered some name. It's fine. It's removed. And I don't enter any name, then it is again displayed. So later I will give you some list of validations. We will discuss validations as a separate part. Then we can, I will give you list of all validations that you can use. Initially, just invalid is a property which will verify the box is valid or invalid. And technically, when we are writing that here, when you are configuring that here and entering some value, you can see it's normal. And this is removed. This is very quite simple because if I have to do that with the JavaScript, jQuery, lot of logic we have to write. Here just we are verifying. But these days, this is not enough. What we want is, actually these days, we don't prefer these type of messages also. We visually show that it is invalid or valid. That means these days our users are intelligent enough to identify that red mark means something problem. Green mark is it's okay. Generally, especially when we design applications for mobile-like devices, when people have to access on mobile and watch. So as much as possible, we need to keep our screen clean without lot of messages on it. In that case, showing alerts, showing messages is not good every time. So these days, what we do is in the modern generation, we just put color. Red color means it's not valid. Green color means it is valid. Just user can understand. But if he is confused about why it is invalid, then we have to display complete tip and messages and show them. Our point here is, I want to change the appearance of this text box based on whether it is valid or invalid. So what I will do here in this now, I will write two classes, that is
Recording in progress.
Box shadow, pixel, 3 pixel, 2 pixel, red. So that is the invalid style. And we have one more, that is the valid style. In the valid style, we are configuring this to the green color. We are defining into this green color. We are specifying that into the green color. So valid style, invalid style. Now we have two classes. These classes need to be applied to the checkbox depending on the status, whether it is valid or not. So then what we do is here in this, now we can apply the, and we need to turn on and off the classes. If valid, one class. If not valid, another class. Then we have an object reference. In that object reference, first invalid style. Okay. So the true false for invalid style comes from username dot invalid. If username is invalid, then it will be true. It will apply invalid style. Similarly, valid style, it will come from username dot valid property. Valid indicates whether it is valid or not. If valid is true, valid style will apply. If invalid is true, invalid style will apply. So it will change the effects dynamically now. You can see here, so it is red color now. That means we are displaying not only the message, but also visually showing that in a red color. So we can type here and it is okay now. It is okay. And if I remove that, then it will be red color. It's not only required. So you can have a lot of attributes. You can use your HTML validations. For example, I given required. Not only required, I can give like min length. Min length is 4 characters. Now for that I am not using message because the message I am showing only invalid. So later you will learn so how to identify every validation. If there are many validations, if required problem is there, it will show invalid. If min length problem is there, it will show invalid. So in that case, what we have to do is we need to handle that, right? So we need to handle that. So technically to change anything, you have to learn CSS. So don't be so silly in your questions now. How to change border color, shadow color. Don't behave like a kid anymore. Because if you want to change border color, you know how to change in CSS, right? You have to know minimum common knowledge about CSS, then you can do all of that. If you don't know CSS, take it light, leave it, because that's why I said that you are not eligible for these sessions if you don't know CSS, HTML, JavaScript. Don't come to these Angular classes. So only if you finish it with them, then come. So because we cannot explain how to give border, how to give background, how to change box borders and all, time waste. So you have to be aware of them and you have to handle them, because you are coming to Angular means you must be very good in your CSS, HTML, JavaScript. We will not waste time in explaining how to write different types of effects. Okay. We are going to just learn here how we can configure them dynamically to the contents. I hope so you are clear in that, right. So technically now the point is here, this can change dynamically, but problem is sometimes what happens is here every element can have multiple validations. If element is having multiple validations, so then valid invalid is not a correct concept. Why? Because generally, so if I give invalid, if required problem, it will show invalid. If min length problem, then also it will show invalid. So for both of them, it is showing the same message. See, I am typing here some name. It's still showing that same name required, but already I am satisfying that required. Now currently min length problem is there, then that relative message should come. So what we have to do is, so here I will tell you in validation concept separately, just for appearance effects I am showing you here. What we have to do first is we need two messages. See, one message is name required. Let's keep like this, name required. Another message is name too short. Okay, these two messages. This div should display when text box is invalid. So for that div, we will use ngIf. ngIf username dot invalid. If username is invalid, then this div should come. But I don't want both messages. Now we need to see both messages are coming. I want to display the first message if a required problem is there. I want the second message if min length problem is there. So if you want to show messages related to errors, then what you have to do is here we have to write like this: ng if here if username dot errors errors dot required errors dot required. That means if it is errors is an object which contains collection of all errors, but errors is not a mandatory. That means if optional one we have to access using. Similarly, we have ngif. So username dot errors dot if min length problem is there, then this message will come. That means we are cleanly classifying. You can add. So one more validation. For example, I am using pattern. Pattern I am defining here. So a hyphen z, and I said so 4 comma 10. That means only uppercase letters 4 to 10. That is, pattern is another HTML validation attribute. These are all HTML validation attributes only. So now we have to display a message for pattern. So then we will put another span, and here we will say ng if username dot errors dot pattern error, then display a message saying that so only block letters allowed, only uppercase letters allowed, only block letters allowed, something. Now you see, now here you have color applying through class. You see, initially name required message only will come, and I started typing the name. Then it will show that see, name too short and only block letters allowed, both messages are coming. So I will enter this one, and enter it. Now it is fine. You will learn later so how to write complete validations, because we will discuss it as a separate session. So in separate session you will learn how to write different validations and how to configure them. You see, if I enter any lowercase letters, it says only block letters allowed, and I remove that. So then only block letters allowed. Any lowercase entered, it will show the message. So, and if I am entering less than, then it says, so name too short, only block letters allowed. So it's depending on so how you want. You can have a lot of conditions in displaying the messages, which you will see. So the point is here, the concept here is, while working with validations, we want to dynamically change the appearance of element. Red color, green color, ng. So ng class is used to configure the CSS classes and apply them dynamically to your elements. And there are different reference styles. If you want to turn on and off the effects, then you use object reference. We use this is class. That's what generally people call as class binding. But actually we keep this in a category called attribute directives. And so sometimes people call this in Angular as class binding. That means you are applying the CSS classes dynamically. That is class binding. Now, another important we have a style binding. We have style binding. Actually, style binding is nothing but using classes .ts file. If you are to access the styles from a CSS and apply to your HTML, for every component, actually, three requests will come. Requests will come. Three requests will come for every component. And if number of
Recording in progress.
embedded means embedded technique means by using style and use them. This is mostly used and
Recording in progress.
are defining the styles. So that means I said some background color. So background color, some yellow. That is the background color. So yellow, some text. So yellow. Okay. And we have like color as red. So red. So that's an object. So and here we have some text align. So I configured that as center. applied for this content. So we are values,
Recording in
because these are
progress.
dynamic values. We can change these values. The dynamic values, we can change those values. We can change them. So how it can handle that, how it can manage that? For example, see, at the top, I'm configuring. So a container like MT3, and here I written as field set. So legend. So choose effects, choose effects. And here, so I given data list with the data term, suppose background color. And here I'm using a select. I'm using a select. And for that, we have an option. So yellow. So we have a option. So yeah, we have an option like blue. So we have an option like green. Like this we have, and they have some value. So value some yellow. You can dynamically generate that from a list. So blue, and he have one value as green. Like this, we are configuring these options and dynamically. So this is the background color. So we have the background color defined, and we can configure anything configured, right? So the class as form select. Okay, I want to apply this dynamically. So I want to apply this dynamically. Let's see class W25. Okay, we want to apply this dynamically. I select that color. That color must apply to that background now. So in that case, so what we can do is we can collect the value from this, and we can apply to the style object. Style object is here. So here I will give the property called background style. So background color style, or say background color value. Background color value initially any type. Now, or we can put some default value. Background color value yellow, I defined like this. And this we can apply here. We can apply here. That means this dot background color value. Background color value. And I can bind this. I can bind this with this drop down by using two-way binding technique, ng model, and I can bind so with background color value, background color value. And you can see that now when I change here, by default it is yellow. I change here, the background color should apply and change. That means it should apply to that style object and configure. That means we are not writing the change event now. So what should happen here is on the change event, it should get that value and apply that. So that means we have to define that on change, the background color value will come and we can apply that. That style object is initially configured, but the new value need to be applied whenever the change occurred. That means on change, on background change, on background change. So it should get the value and it should apply that value. It should get the value and apply the value. That means what you can define here is this dot style object will update now. The style object will update. So with so many details. One is background color. It will update from this dot background color. So color value, background color value. So that's what we are configuring here. So background color value. So the background color value must be configured there. Okay. And color, rest of the effects color. So I give as red. Currently, we don't have controls for them. So text align, I give as center. Like this, we are defining. And this on change should fire up. So background change should fire up when user is changing this. That means here we have to define. So change is the event. And generally HTML event is on change. Now here we define as change. On change here, which one to define? That means we have to access. So on background change, this method will fire up. So the name I given as on background change. So capitalizations, yes. On background change, this will fire up. And it will update the value. That means whatever the value you defined, it will update that value. So the style object is going to update the value. The style object is going to update the value when you are changing the color. It is going to change that. I select here blue, then it gets the blue, and yellow, green, it will change that. Dynamically, it is changing the value and configuring the value. It is applying the values dynamically and configuring that. Now, important is when you are configuring and changing the values. Similarly, you can apply for others. That means, so we need another property here. So another property here. So color value. Color value is an any type and initially it is red. So, and we have alignment. Alignment is any type, initially it is center. Now you can configure the controls for that, bind for them. You see now we are not configuring a class. We are not using a class. So we are not defining a class. So without the class, we are defining the effects, specifying the effects and using them. We are not using any class. So we are not accessing from any separate class file. Directly we are defining inline. We are configuring that inline. We are applying that inline. So without the class. So for that you need other controls also. For example, now, so I used data term. So this is alignment and the data definition. So we have input type is equal to radio. And the value for this radio is some left. And the text is left. And name is align. The same I'm configuring here. So, and one more is it needs to be binded with ng model. It needs to bind with, so alignment. It needs to bind with alignment. And of course, so we have that updated, then all that should be updated with alignment. So only the value will change left, center, and right. Left, center, and right. And we are writing here center and right. So right. We are configuring it. Now you can see here we have the radio buttons. But when I select right alignment, on change, on change. And remember, I written as on background change for background only, for background only. For example, here, this comes from alignment comes from, so this dot alignment, it comes from alignment on change. We will bind the same on change here. That means change is equal to on change, on change. That means on the change of value. So we are binding for both drop down and radius also. That means on the radius, so it will change the effect and it will apply that. You can see the left alignment, center alignment, right alignment. You can change the background color. You can change the alignments here. We can apply. That means same event I can use for all of them. So I can use all of them so that they will update the value on changing, on changing. So dynamically, we are applying the effects and configuring the effects. So by using these directives. So this is class binding and style binding like techniques. We use with various types of events. We use with various types of events. We configure with various types of events and define them. So this is one important, generally we call as class binding and style binding. There are so many techniques, actually, so many techniques. So I showed you one technique, and it's not mandatory that you will see in the same way everyone is using. According to the situation and the requirements, there are different approaches to handle this actually. Sometimes what you do is, sometimes you will see that people using, suppose, see, I'm applying a style object here. Style object. Actually, style object is a object which contains the collection of styles, and they are defining different values for them. But sometimes you will see that people using in a different approach. Different approach means, roughly I will show you here. So I will create a method as get effects. Get effects is a method. Okay, this get effects method, in this get effects method, we are creating an object. So we are creating an object, or this get effects method can directly return, can return. So an object, it can return an object. This can return an object. So usually how it returns the object, suppose it will have color as some green. Okay, so and background color, so or say some text align to left or center like this. That means we created a method. This method is returning an object. It returning an object. Now get effects is a method which is returning an object. Now people have an habit of, so I want to apply ng style. Here I will access get effects method. We will configure the method. So then you can see that that is applied here. That is applied here. Now the point is, I am not using directly an object. I'm using a method which is returning an this, that is similar to of techniques. When you go through several websites, you will be very confused. One person say you need an object, another person showing you that a method is called here. right? That means all are same, but only the concept is. So according to the situation, sometimes we need a method. So sometimes we need a object directly. Generally, when you need a method, why you need a method written actually? So we know that in generally in TypeScript, we create method. So if anyone asks like, why you need a method, why you need a method, without return type void. So number. If anyone asks like, why a method is given with a data type, why a method is given with a data type, then what will be your answer? What do you say? Why a method is defined with a return type? Why a method is defined with a return type? If anyone asks that, why a method is defined with a return type, then what we will say? What will be your answer? Why a method needs return type? Why a method needs return type? Okay. Ha. Okay. See, the let's go into more technical way. See, technical way means I will tell you the point here. So it's a very simple and straightforward concept. Yeah, I have read all your answers, but so the concept is, for example, so here we are configuring a method. So we are configuring a method and with some functionality, method with some functionality. Now for this method, so you are not right, Nitin Agrawal, you are not right. You are always wrong here. Okay. Uh, so satisfied, Nitin Agrawal, you are not right. Satisfied? Huh? Uh, so now listen to me. Uh, so you are not right. Listen to me. Right. Now the concept here is method with return type. That means how you configured the return type. Oh, how you configure the return type. Generally, so we have the method to handle some functionality. That means method's intention is to define some functionality. So through this functionality, it returns some values. Through the functionality, it returns some values. Some values. Now to store these values, to store these values, to store these values, we need to allocate memory to store values. Function returns some values, and to store the returned values you need to allocate memory. That means you need some variables to store those variables and access and use the values. That means what we are doing now here is actually, so we have a method. So we have a method and configured the method. Some a is equal to 10. So that means we are declaring some variable, let. So a is equal to 10. So let, so b is equal to 20. So let c equal to a plus b. That means we need a separate memory. We need a separate memory to store the value of a plus b and use that c value anywhere you want. That means you need this C memory separately to handle this A plus B value. Now, instead of doing that, instead of doing that, instead of doing this, so instead of separately allocating memory for that, we are defining a data type. So for this data type, for this method, which you call as return type, data type for this method. So method is defined with the data type. What is the meaning of method giving a data type? What is the meaning of method giving a data type? That means you are telling the method to store some number type value. Understood? You are telling the method not only to handle a functionality, you are telling the method to store some value also. Once you are defining data type, that means you are telling the method that allocate memory by that method name to store the value. That means now method is configured for two functionalities. One, it will execute your function, perform the functionality. Two, it will not need any additional memory. It will use the function memory as a reference to store the values returned by the function. That means the function itself uses its memory to store the values returned by the function. It doesn't require any additional, memory. Then what you do here, you write return A plus B, then the result of A plus B, will be stored inside this method name, method reference name. Understood? That means now method is used as to method is used so for storing value, method is used for storing value, and method is used to performing a functionality. That means method have a reference of memory to store your value. Method have a reference for storing the value. So why you define a method with a data type? We define method with the data type to tell that store that type of value. So generally data type is defined for variables. Am I right? Generally data type is defined for variables. Am I right? So data type is defined for variables. Then why you are defining data type for method? You are defining data type for method to tell that method will be used as a variable to store the value. That means now what method will do is it will allocate memory for the values of that particular method. In that memory itself, it can handle those values. Now you don't need any additional memory to allocate to handle the values for this method. Method can use its own memory for storing the values. And if you define void, generally you might have learned in your technologies like void means no return type. Actually, you are telling void means you are telling that don't allocate any memory for this, for storing the values. Just load the memory, execute the functionality, and discard the memory. Discard the memory. After executing, discard the memory. That is called void. Void means discarding the memory. That means discarding the return type. Actually, people call as discarding return type. Discarding return type means destroy the return value. Void indicates that it is discarding the return type. So why you give void? You give void to tell that you don't need to hold any value. Void is to tell that you don't need to hold any value. If you don't use void and you define any another type, that means you are telling that you have to hold this type of value. So return type is defined for a method to tell the method that it needs to hold a value. And what happens is it stores that value in the memory. After storing the value, So why return keyword is used? Return keyword is used to tell that after storing the value, into this method reference, stop execution. Return is a jump statement. So return is not used to return value. Many people will have a wrong assumption. So you people generally tell like this: it will return A plus B. Return is not a statement. Return is not a statement to return value. Return is a statement to terminate the execution. Am I right? Return is a statement not to return value. Return is a statement to terminate the execution. Right? That means now after storing the value in the memory of the method, it is terminating that method. That means now method functionality is terminated, only its value is present inside the method. Understood? The method functionality is terminated and only the value of the methods will be stored inside the method, so that you can access those values by the name of the method, just like a variable, and you can use that any location. What is the advantage of this? You don't need to allocate any additional memory for your methods to handle the values. Method can use its own memory. After discarding the functionality, it will work like memory reference, so that it can hold the value and you can use the value. That means it is performing this functionality. After performing this functionality, then it is storing these values under this reference, and that you are accessing and you are using here. So that is the meaning of return types. So return type, technically return type. So that is the basic thing how it works, right? Now this is in different ways how you can handle and how you can work with these options, right? So that means sometimes people write directly the object, sometimes people write a method that returns the object, and that is the basic approach. So this is the basic approach of configuring the options. Now how this data binding works, so we have learned all the techniques. Now that means we learned about class binding, we learned about style binding, we learned about general basic data binding. Now we need to understand how we can deal with the concept of event binding. What is event binding and how event binding works in Angular? That we will see in our next session, right? On Monday, we will discuss about what is event binding and how event binding works in Angular. Okay, right.